My name is Jeremy Chan. I'm a senior analyst at the Eurasia Group. I work on the China and Northeast Asia team. I cover mostly Korean Peninsula dynamics, so North Korea, South Korea, and a lot of Chinese foreign policy, particularly as it intersects with its East Asian partner countries. More broadly, the Eurasia Group, we are the world's leading sort of geopolitical risk firm. We've got global coverage. We cover all major countries in the world, as well as a lot of sectors and industries as well, things like technology, healthcare, aerospace, et cetera. And essentially, we try to help our clients understand what developments are occurring in the world, but more importantly, what developments will be occurring or what this means for their bottom line, particularly the corporate value up program, that was talked about in January and officially unveiled, I think, in February. There was a ton of client interest from foreign investors because fundamentally that program is targeting the foreign investor community. It's speaking to not only the fears or the reservations that foreign investors might have about investing in Korea vis-a-vis corporate governance risks, but also resolving essentially the Korea discount. And so I think these foreign investors, many of whom are our clients, heard about that program and they were very interested in knowing about the details of it, but also how the legislative elections might impact sort of the future or development of the program. So I'll be honest with you, we expected the DP to win. So we expected the status quo to reign. We did not expect the margin that the DP won by. We think this is a more decisive victory than we were expecting. So the DP absolutely outperformed, I think, expectations at not only the Eurasia Group, but across kind of the market consensus. With that, we think that where Korea ended up actually, from a status quo and policy perspective, is the Goldilocks scenario. That you could have erred too much in either direction. You could have had too strong of a victory for the DP, which would have been, I think, just destabilizing for Korea from a political risk perspective. But you could have had the opposite. You could have had no party win 150 seats. Kind of ended up with a relatively clear outcome, which I think sets a relatively clear direction for where the country is going to travel for at least the next 3 years. I think our general assumption is that what we've seen over the last 2 years is a preview of the coming attractions, which is to say, we know more or less what the next 3 years will look like. And that's why we're in the Goldilocks scenario, which is to say, from an investor perspective, at least you have a pretty good idea of where the DP is, particularly under the leadership of Lee Jae-myung, and where the PPP is, more or less under the leadership of Yoon and his ministries, in terms of where their priorities are at and how they may or may not interact with each other. That's the positive spin on this Goldilocks scenario outcome. The negative spin is that, as you indicated, there is a large and a widening gap or gulf between the policy visions of the left and the right in Korea. I think part of that has to do with the personal animosity between Lee and Yoon, who have not met even once in person in the last 2 years, which is a pretty astounding fact. Even as an American, where political polarization runs high, it's hard to imagine that the top two politicians who represent the two major parties would not be speaking with each other for more than 2 years. So that speaks a little bit to why we should also be concerned for the next 3 years, and why maybe the longer term trajectory for South Korea is not quite as optimistic as is that I think, as I explained to a lot of clients, there's a difference between means and ends, which is to say, the end goal of increasing the valuations of Korean corporations, that's something that the center left can get behind as well. They don't oppose on the merits higher stock valuations for Korean companies, greater inflows of foreign investment, for example, a reduction in the Korea discount. Those are all things that I think Lee himself and the broader kind of center left would support. The question is just, how do we get there? And so, to my earlier point, I don't think that the DP will be leaning into tax cuts as the reason to get there. But if there are other sort of creative solutions that either the government can propose or the center left can propose to incentivize companies to undertake these reforms, then I think that you could see there being an emergence of alternative, or like I said, more creative solutions to achieve the ends, because at least they're all kind of pulling, broadly speaking, at the same goal or the same direction. In the Korean context, what's interesting is that inflation, and therefore interest rates as well, accompanying them, it's not nearly as extreme as it is in I think the US and in Europe. and yet it did play, I think, a major factor in the election, not only because I think voters are broadly dissatisfied with the direction of the economy and particularly with Yoon's management of it, but it also just sort of seemed a little bit tone deaf heading into it, not exemplified by the green onion issue. That I think that really had some political salience for voters, that it seemed like Yoon was just sort of out of touch or callous and uncaring about the concerns of everyday Koreans.